encouraged to keep the Sabbath in the Old Testament? This is one of the number one scriptures that people bring up, or number one concepts that people bring up, and they say, Jim, nowhere in the Bible does God tell Gentiles that they have to keep the Sabbath. And I say, really? Isaiah 56, let's see what it says. Also the sons of the stranger, Goyim, the Gentiles, and the sons of the Gentiles that join themselves to the Lord to serve him and to love the name of Yahweh, to be his servants, every one that keeps the Sabbath from polluting it, and taketh hold of my covenant. Even them will I bring to my holy mountain, and make them joyful in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and their sacrifices shall be accepted upon my altar, for my house shall be called a house of prayer for all the nations. Do you hear what the great God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is saying right here? He is saying that even the Gentiles, if they come, if is the key word, I-F, if they come and they keep my Sabbath and they keep from profaning it, I will accept them as my own people. And the key word there is if. Two important things he's saying in the scripture. First of all, he allows the Gentiles to come in and be his people. Number two, he puts a condition on it. You will be my people if you do what I tell you to do. It's no different than a father that tells his son that's 17 years old, that's kind of talking back, and he says, son, if you want to live in this house, you can finish the rest of it. You're going to play by my rules. You see, it works on earth. It works in every workplace. You can't just walk into a workplace and look at the rules as they train you on your first day and say, you know what, I'm going to choose this rule, but I don't really like this rule. I think I'm going to leave at 3 o'clock instead of 5:30. It doesn't work like that, or you don't stay very long. And I'm going to suggest that we have turned God from Creator Yahweh into our friend and buddy, where we have the choice to choose to serve him when and how we want. Let's continue. We have one law for both. Exodus 12:49 says this, one law shall be for him that is homeborn, and unto the stranger that sojourns among you. So there's one law for us, and there's the same law for the Jews. The same law for all of Israel. See, doesn't that make a lot more sense that he has one law for one people, one nation, under God, indivisible, and with liberties and so on and so forth, in one land, under one king? It's all about one. The second you split it, we have issues. So here's the game plan. This is an illustration that I give quite a bit because I think it seems to help people understand what the purpose of Israel was. Think of Israel as a football team, and they are the captains of the team. So Yahweh wanted to get a team together because all of the teams went their own way and they didn't want to play in his stadium anymore. So finally he had to choose someone to get back into the stadium so that he could begin to bring the people back in one place, because they're in all their own stadiums and he wants them in his stadium and to play on his field. So he chose the Israelites to be the captains of the team. Their job was to do this. Their job was to do what the owner of the team told them to do, to practice the way that the owner told them to practice, and to play the way that the owner told them to play. And if they did that, this would result in the team being so blessed that all of the other players from all the other teams would quit their teams, stop playing in their stadiums, which he didn't build, and they would come back to Yahweh's stadium. They would play on his team. They would beg to be on his team. Their light, quote, was supposed to show them the way. The light coming out of the stadiums would be so amazing that they would say, man, we don't even have light in our stadium. We can only play during the day. And they would come and be able to play on his turf, his way, and be blessed by his rules. Bottom line, the Sabbath was given to the whole world in Genesis chapter 2 when everything was perfect and when clearly it was intended to be for all time. It was written down on Mount Sinai and given to all of the children of Israel, not just one, but all 12 tribes, with the intent for them to keep it and thus be a light for the nations. And it's not a Jewish Sabbath. So dispelling myth number one, very clearly, it is not a Jewish Sabbath. It says that it is the Sabbath of Yahweh. So if it was given to the Israelites and through them the nations, then the next logical question is, who are we? If it was given to the Israelites and not to the Jews, you might say, well, Jim, I'm a Gentile. I'm not an Israelite at all. I'm not a Jew, and I'm not from any Middle Eastern descent or so on. I'm just an American Christian. How does this relate to me? Well, let's find out. In Jeremiah chapter 11, verse 16, one of the most popular chapters in all of the New Testament, it says this. It says, the Yahweh called thy name, a green olive tree, fair and of goodly fruit. So right here in Jeremiah chapter 11, and this is a verse that is not very well known. Now, the one that I was talking about was Romans 11, which is very popular, but Romans 11 is attached to Jeremiah 11. You cannot get into Romans 11 without first understanding what's happening in Jeremiah 11 is that Yahweh calls his bride, his people, the chosen people, an olive tree. Very critical if we're going to understand who we are and how this all relates to the Sabbath. Ephesians chapter 2 says, remember that at that time you were separate from Christ, the Messiah, excluded from citizenship in Israel. Excluded, meaning they're not allowed to be part of Israel. And foreigners or Gentiles to the covenants of the promise. Covenants with an S, by the way. Without hope and without God in the world. But now in Yeshua the Messiah, you who were once far away have been brought near through the blood of Christ. So you hear what's happening here is, first of all, he says that you once were far off. You were not allowed to be a citizen of Israel. You could not even be part of her covenants. Do you realize that the writer of Ephesians is putting value in the covenants of promise? Because he's saying that you were not allowed to have this blessing. You were not even allowed to be a part of it. But let's keep reading. He says, therefore, going back to Exodus 31, it says, therefore the children of Israel shall keep the Sabbath to observe the Sabbath throughout their generations as a perpetual covenant. It is a sign between me and the children of Israel forever. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, and on the 7th day he rested and he was refreshed. So think about it this way. First of all, Jeremiah 11 says that Israel is an olive tree. Ephesians 2 says, you who were once far off have now been brought near, and you've been made fellow citizens with the household of God. Romans 11 talks about being grafted in. It says what? There's 2 olive trees, okay? 2 olive trees, and the wild olive tree gets grafted back into the cultivated olive tree, and let's substitute the correct word in Jeremiah 11, gets cultivated back into Israel. So these Gentiles actually are no longer Gentiles. Do you realize, viewer, that the word Gentile means out of covenant? So if you consider yourself a Gentile Christian, what you're really saying is you're an out-of-covenant Christian, and that's an oxymoron. You can't have that. Either you are in covenant and you're part of the Messiah, or you're out of covenant and you will spend eternity away from him. So what we're having here is that Paul is not having a brilliant stroke of genius. He is literally quoting the Old Testament, and he is saying, listen, all of those who were sent to the 4 corners of the earth, you are now allowed to come back home. The Gentiles are allowed to be part of Israel. That's why he says, you are now fellow citizens of Israel. You are Israelite heritage, and you now have access to the covenants. He doesn't say covenant as if there's only one covenant called the New Covenant. Middle Eastern covenants layer on one another. In Greek, in our Western Christian mindset, we think old is done away, new is new. We cannot combine the two. We don't understand how Middle Eastern covenants work. They are transparencies that reveal, they never go away. They simply reveal a bigger part of the picture. This is critical to understand, that you become a citizen of Israel and become subject to her covenants of promise. Ladies and gentlemen, you are Israel. You are not a Baptist, a Methodist. There's no Lutheran line or non-denominational line on Judgment Day at the resurrection. Either there is a line for Israelites, the chosen people, or there's a line for Gentiles, pagans, those that do not know Yeshua as Messiah. It doesn't even matter if you have Jewish blood. Either you are part of Israel and you believe in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and you are following Yeshua the Messiah, or you do not, you see. That's why Paul says that it doesn't matter if you're even born a Jew. It matters if you are a Jew in your heart, if you are truly following him through obedience in the Messiah. And why is this so critical to understand? Why did I just go through all of that to determine who's Israel? Because if you recognize who you are, that you are Israel, then it makes way more sense and it's more relevant to continue our study today, because the Sabbath was given to Israel. And it says it was given for all eternity. So now we have completely dispelled myth number 2, that it was only given to the Jews, because it wasn't. It was given to all Israel. Now we understand that it was given to anyone who is calling themselves a child of God, which is anyone that believes in the Messiah. You are grafted in according to Romans chapter 11.